Recently, I commissioned Greg at Poparena to make a video about what is now Season 1 of The Legend of Korra rather than the whole thing, for which we can all be very thankful. I really liked it. He had a lot of great stuff to say, even if we don't quite agree on everything, and I recommend you check it out. I was also moved to make my own video since I have some very different issues with the show than he does, and just like that video, there will be spoilers here, so proceed at your own risk. My overall view of the series is that it's very much the Deep Space Nine to Last Airbender's original series / TNG. It's set 70 years later, the characters stay in one place rather than traveling around, and there's an increased focus on a story arc rather than standalone stories. It's also far more confident right off the bat. While watching The Last Airbender, especially Season 1, you really get the sense that Mike DiMartino and Brian Konietzko were hamstrung to some extent by the Nickelodeon execs on the kind of material they could show and how much hand-holding they had to do regarding the bigger story arcs. There is none of that here, as Mike and Brian clearly have now built up the clout to do exactly what they want when they want. It gets to the point where you wonder if there's any oversight from BS&P at all. Can you name any other kid shows that feature an on-screen, not ambiguous at all, murder-suicide? This is also apparent in the level of talent they were able to rustle up, with folks like J.K. Simmons, Daniel Day Kim, and Steve Bloom in major roles. And something I'm utterly flabbergasted by is that no one but me seems to think it's impressive that they got Eva Marie Saint to play the older Katara. This would be the star of films like On the Waterfront, North by Northwest, and Exodus, and now at age 88 she's on The Legend of Korra. That is a casting coup if ever I saw one, and I want people to acknowledge it. And I also think it's very nice of them to do their part in seeing that Seychelle Gabriel doesn't spend the rest of her life being known only for having penis hair and saying she believes in her beliefs. The animation has received a significant upgrade and the story is completely gripping right up to the finale. And of course that's where my problems start. One thing I'm in agreement with Greg on is that the reveal of Amon's identity is a cop-out, though for a quite different reason. The show does what I like to call the I know what you did last summer approach, where there's all this buildup of the mystery of who this guy is, and then he turns out to be someone we've never heard of before. Even his connection to Tarlok doesn't do much for me, since there's no way anyone could have guessed it. And even if they took the approach of him being someone we hadn't necessarily heard of, it didn't have to be this bad. My own theory before the finale aired was that he was a guy whose face was stolen by Ko, and he made a deal to get it back if he could take down the Avatar permanently. We do still have that hanging line from the last series about how Ko will meet the Avatar again someday, after all. However, I really disagree that his lying about his backstory negates the legitimate issues the Equalists raise. It's clear that his belief that bending needs to be purged from the world is sincere, even if he's lying about how he came to that conclusion. And I do have faith that Mike and Brian respect their audience enough that these issues won't just be dropped in future seasons. Of course, if I'm wrong about that, I will quite gladly jump on the bandwagon here. Then we have the very ending of the season. Here my issue isn't that Korra got her powers back, seeing as they thought this was going to be the whole story and ordering new animation at the point they found out there would be more was probably completely unfeasible. But that it didn't have to be such a blatant deus ex machina. It turns out that Amon's de-bending ability is a form of bloodbending. Well, Katara is one of the few bloodbenders in the world, so why can't she help? Yeah, she hates that she can do it and swore to never do it again, but do you really think she'd stick to that if it meant the world having an avatar who can do nothing but airbend for the foreseeable future? And now for my biggest problem of all, Mako and Korra. Oh, and incidentally, I really can't stand it when people say Mako instead of Mako, both for the character and the actor he's named after. As an android once said, one is his name, the other is not. Anyway, this whole romantic subplot never once worked for me. It's not quite to Jack Kate Sawyer levels, thank God, but I just don't see why the show needed a love triangle or square at all. The Last Airbender got along just fine without one. Well, one that existed in more than just the heads of frustrated Buffy spike shippers anyway. And the story here was definitely strong enough that it also didn't need this. I actually did really like the episode The Spirit of Competition at the time, because I assumed it was burning through all the potential romantic complications at once so the show could move on to stuff that we might actually be interested in. But no, it just keeps going. And in the end, we get the same bullshit cop-out that you find in movies like My Favorite Wife and Gentleman's Agreement, where Asami is set up as a perfectly nice girl who you want to be happy, and yet for some reason the writers just didn't want Mako with her, so in the last few minutes he declares his love for Korra while Asami is just completely ignored and they hope we don't notice. To me, this is a bigger problem than the rest because while the others can be explained by the fact that this was going to be a standalone miniseries, the lack of thought toward Asami is a bigger problem because it was going to be a standalone miniseries. We came pretty close to this being it, with Mako telling Korra he loves her while it's not clear at all if he even bothered to break up with his current girlfriend first. I've heard that the scene right before they split up on their separate missions where they tell each other they care about each other was supposed to be the breakup, but if that really is the case, I really don't see why they couldn't have made that more clear. I sure didn't get the idea that they were breaking up from that scene, and I guess not a lot of other people did either. And yet despite all that, I'm definitely going to be watching Season 2. There's so much good stuff here that I'm not dissuaded by the events of a season finale that was largely forced on the production team by outside factors. And from what I hear about the plans for Season 2, Greg may get his wish for a story about a crippled Avatar after all, as the word is Korra is going to be trapped in the spirit world where bending doesn't work. I can't wait.